is on the road. He is in Europe. If you're in the United Kingdom, if you're in Ireland, if you're in Scotland, if you're anywhere in that area, catch Jimmy live if you can. Some tickets are still available. I know some shows are sold out, but go to jimmydore.com for more info and for tickets. On today's show, we're going to talk about the latest in the protests in LA and Trump's ongoing crackdown. We're going to talk about Trump's upcoming military parade / birthday celebration. Trump threatening protesters who come out for that, while claiming he's never heard of any protests, but just in case anyone decides to show up. We're also going to talk about rumors, fears of some new military conflict between Iran and Israel and the U.S. The U.S. is pulling out embassy staff from Iraq. It's pulling out other personnel from around the Middle East. Israel, of course, has been talking tough as usual, expecting Trump, I think, to back it up if it goes to war against Iran. And we'll talk about the latest across the Middle East. Trump administration making it official that it won't seek a Palestinian state, pretty much confirming what every other administration in recent memory has said, except Trump administration basically saying we don't care about a Palestinian state. And if we have time, we'll get into a little Ukraine war too, including Tulsi Gabbard getting attacked for warning about nuclear war, which, according to her critics, is basically a Kremlin talking point. So if you're worried about nuclear war, sorry, everybody, you're just repeating Putin propaganda, according to Tulsi Gabbard's critics. But up first, we're going to turn to what's happening in LA. And for that, I will bring in our first guest. Joining us now is Julissa Dugro. She is an independent journalist reporting from LA for Mint Press News. And let's bring her in, making her Jimmy Dore Show debut. Hello, Julissa.
Hey, Aaron. How are you?
Thank you for joining us. So you've been on the ground in LA reporting on what's going on. The dominant theme that we're getting from afar is that LA is in chaos. There's riots. According to the Trump administration, they had to send in the National Guard backed up by Marines because things are just out of control. What have you seen on the ground in your time reporting there?
So far, we definitely have, there's a very large presence of the California National Guard as well as the LAPD. They're quite literally everywhere. I've seen some on rooftops, definitely inside of a lot of federal buildings and outside of almost every federal or community building. They're standing there posted up, ready to take on protesters should they, start protests in front of those buildings. And so as far as the National Guard, I was at a protest yesterday documenting and covering that live. And actually the National Guard didn't, directly get involved. It almost was like they were there for pure intimidation. They also brought in Humvees, and those Humvees were positioned towards the crowds. The protest that I attended yesterday was peaceful, not even fairly peaceful. It was peaceful. Nobody was violent, nothing was thrown, things like that. And from what I saw, the LAPD started shooting first. And so this is what I'm seeing. And so I think a lot can be implied from this. So this is what I'm seeing. The protesters, there are protests all day. It just varies in size. So in scope and as well as location, we've got them ranging all across LA, early in the morning, late at night. You have spontaneous protests that arise due to, ICE raids or detentions or arrests and things like that. And so that's just kind of what we're seeing right now.
So I'm curious to hear from you what people have been telling you about why they've come out and how they feel about the narrative that the Trump administration has been pushing, which is that they had to send in the National Guard because things were just out of control and because the LA police weren't doing their job enough to protect the city from looters and rioters. But I want to turn first to Stephen Miller, who's sort of seen as the architect of Trump's anti-immigrant crackdown and what he has said. He's actually an LA native, so he claims to take all this very, very personally. He's responding to the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, who said that we didn't have a problem until Trump got involved, by which he means Trump getting involved to basically order the National Guard in to crack down on protests. So Stephen Miller says, didn't have a problem Your state is a criminal sanctuary for millions of illegal alien invaders, cartel killers, foreign terrorists, transnational gangs, and insurrectionist mobs. Huge swaths of the city where I was born now resemble failed third world nations, a ruptured, balkanized society of strangers. And according to a recent report in the Wall Street Journal, Stephen Miller is the one who basically ordered immigration officials to increase their crackdown, not just going after, actual convicted criminals, but to go after the kind of people who have been targeted in LA, the workers who go to places like Home Depot for work. So this is some of what the Wall Street Journal reported. Even with the high-profile arrests of suspects by masked immigration agents and the plane loads of migrants swiftly ferried out of the U.S., President Trump was falling short of the number of daily deportations carried out by the Biden administration in its final year. So in late May, Stephen Miller addressed a meeting at the headquarters of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, known as ICE. The message was clear. The president, who promised to deport millions of immigrants living in the country illegally, wasn't pleased. The agency had better step it up. Gang members and violent criminals, what Trump called the worst of the worst, weren't the sole target of deportations. Federal agents needed to, quote, just go out there and arrest illegal aliens, Miller told top ICE officials who had come from across the U.S., according to people familiar with the meeting. Agents didn't need to develop target lists of immigrants suspected of being in the U.S. illegally, a longstanding practice, Miller said. Instead, Miller directed them to target Home Depot, where day laborers typically gather for hire, or 7-Eleven convenience stores. So not even going after like workplaces that are suspected of having people working there illegally, let alone going after like documented criminals who've committed serious crimes, but just going after people gathered at Home Depot or in 7-Eleven. The article goes on, Miller bet that he and a handful of agents could go out on the streets of Washington and arrest 30 people right away. ICE agents appear to follow Miller's tip and conducted an immigration sweep Friday at the Home Depot in the predominantly Latino neighborhood of Westlake in Los Angeles, helping set off a weekend of protests around Los Angeles County, including at the Federal Detention Center in the city's downtown. And that's the following day, Trump then ordered 2,000 National Guard troops to Southern California. So according to this narrative from the Wall Street Journal, Miller tells his agents, don't just go after like serious criminals, go after migrant laborers gathered at places like Home Depot or in the parking lots of 7-Eleven. And that's what then kicks off this unrest in LA. How does that track with what you've heard in your reporting on the streets of LA?
Well, first of all, it feels stereotypically racist to only target a Home Depot. Why haven't we raided, Targets or Walmarts? So let me make that clear. That's just ridiculous in and of itself. Everything else, I've heard that from law enforcement. When I was detained yesterday, they kind of expressed that same opinion and sentiment to me that aligns with the narrative.
Well, explain this, Lisa. So you were covering a protest and you got detained.
I was covering a protest yesterday and I was detained along with other media members and every single protester that did attend that protest. And essentially what they all did over the course of an hour was they slowly kettled us in. We didn't even really realize it until you're blocked in on all sides by the LAPD and their Humvees, in your face. And so we were flashbanged, as well as rubber bullets were, ricocheted off the pavement. They eventually did fire at the crowds and things like that. Pepper bombs, if I'm not mistaken, is what they're called, were sprayed. So it made it difficult to breathe. Your throat is scratchy. You have to sneeze a lot. And so you kind of want to get away from that. So we all had to mask up. Eventually everybody was sat. And we all were detained. And what we were told, everybody was asking, are you going to arrest us or are you going to let us go? And they said, we're going to arrest you for not leaving the vicinity when we've ordered you to leave. Then after that, we were all put along a wall. My phone was confiscated. They took all my belongings off of me and cuffed me against the wall. And then it was, really interesting. And I'll get to your question about the Wall Street Journal. Something that was really interesting to me was when I was detained, the only reason they let me go is because I proved to them that I was a journalist. And let me tell you how it was. I didn't have any credential. They were like, where's your press card? I'm like, I'm working with Mint Press News, but I'm an independent journalist, outside of that. So, and they were like, well, just prove it to us. well, what makes my work and, what makes my work and position more verifiable than maybe an activist next to me that's not a journalist, but, does the same, amount of work in the same scope or in the same area. And so essentially all I had to do was just prove that I was a journalist. I mean, and the question begs, what if I was a journalist, instead of being in front of the camera, I was behind it protesting? Would I still be protected as a journalist and not an activist? And so these were questions that I was thinking about as I was released. So I was eventually given back all of my belongings, and they separated the media from the protesters. They put the protesters in these buses that they had brought earlier. And what I was told is that they were shipped off to the jail. So that's kind of what happened. And then they officially blocked that street off. And that was South Alameda Street off of Temple at that intersection. Now, as far as the rhetoric on behalf of the Wall Street Journal, it's really interesting because every single person that I've talked to, and I've even talked to those not involved in protests, and I've asked them, what are you thinking about these protests? Did you suspect at all that on Friday such protests as these would even arise? Did you expect that they would go on this long? And a lot of them anticipate, actually, they told me that it'll go on longer. And they say the people of California are very strong, and every single person, and I mean every single, that's not, hyperbolic, like every single person that I've spoken to is like baffled at the idea of detaining and arresting illegal immigrants, people they perceive as illegal immigrants, because they say illegal immigrants in general that, have come to California have contributed so much culturally, economically, in the workforce to California. The culture is super ingrained. Immigrants have brought so much culture, their food, their businesses to California. And so they say that. One protester told me that, immigrants, these immigrants, they put our food on our tables, they teach our children. We love their language. We love their music. We love what they bring us, but we don't love them. And so he told me, we're not going to sit by idly and just let them take people off of the street. And that's exactly what they're doing. Yesterday at the protest, actually, the LAPD got into a circle, really randomly, I'll say, charged into the middle of the protests and grabbed one man and then went out. Grabbed one man and took him into the VA center, which they didn't read anything off to him. They didn't say why they were detaining him or, what that was about. And in my head, it was just, it was a warning to the rest of us that it could be any of us. And so they took him into the VA center. We don't really know what happened to him. So I even took some drives around LA last night. I, drove all across LA to kind of get a feel for the city. And I mean, a lot of it was, restaurants from different cultures, like posters and plays and people with offices and things like that, just from all different types of cultures. And so when we think of California, I think it's a beautiful melting pot. And I don't think that Californians in general are willing to sit back and allow this to happen. So, on the terms of fighting for dignity and justice in the, in a world or in an America that seeks to silence any race, is currently what we're going through, to be quite frank. These people are actively opposing it. They're actively challenging it. And we see this even in, protesters that aren't immigrants. They're not immigrants in America. They're not connected to immigrants. They don't have family that are immigrants, but they say, like, I'm here for free speech. I'm here because we have a right to protest. I spoke to one man. He was a pastor at the Crescenta Methodist Church here in California. And he said, it's my duty to stand up for the vulnerable. I'm following Jesus's word that I'm here to stand up for the vulnerable, and he's getting detained. I had another man that was an Air Force veteran for 10 years. He was deployed shortly after 9/11. And he told me, he says, I'm a veteran and America forgets veterans. America doesn't take care of veterans at all. And he said, I'm a gay man. So I was under the don't ask, don't tell law. And so I wasn't allowed to speak my truth for a very long time. And so people from all different walks of life, different paths, nationalities, races, religions have come together. They all definitely have one shared purpose, though, no matter if they're immigrant affiliated or not, is that they're actively opposing the injustice and the dismantling of free speech that the United States right now is actively imposing.
All right, Julissa, hang on. We'll have more after this break. Over to Misha.
All right, let's see what we got. Hopefully, yep, I'm unmuted. Unvaccinated guy, we've got a few from you. These are going to be read with some I'm going to have to blank out some names. Blank changed his name for his all-male OnlyFans. Thank you for that, unvaccinated guy. Look, I'm trying to read what I can from it. FSO says Trump gets tanks and soldiers for his birthday. What? He couldn't settle for balloons and clowns or a bouncy castle at most. Yeah, what's up with that? FSO, thank you for the chat. Unvaccinated guy is back. Gogurt inspired Metzger to package his loads for blank and blank. All right, thank you for that, unvaccinated guy. And now back to Aaron.
I'm Aaron Mate here with independent journalist Jaleesa Dugro. She's reporting in LA for Mint Press News on the protest. Here is Stephen Miller, the architect of Trump's anti-immigrant crackdown, and he's offended by something. He's offended by all the foreign flags that he's seen at these protests, predominantly the Mexican flag. He says this, look at all the foreign flags. Los Angeles is occupied territory. Well, I could think of somewhere else that's occupied territory. And that's where Stephen Miller works. It's called Congress. And look at all the Israeli flags that are on Capitol Hill. That's one Congress member's office with a Israeli flag saying, I stand with Israel. Here's Congress member Jim Jordan, a Republican. He says, we fly the American flag in America. And he got community noted on X by people who pointed out that Congress member Jordan has an Israeli flag outside his office door. It could even be that one. Here is Jason Bassier on Twitter. Let's be real. If these were the flags they were waving, the right would have never said a word. And these are, I think, photoshopped Israeli flags on images of some of the protesters that are there in LA. And it's true. Here's David Shares. The fact of the matter is, in America, if you wave the Israeli flag, you are a good American who loves his country. And if you are an American but wave Mexico's flag, all of a sudden you are an illegal criminal dirtbag. This is the America we live in, sad. And there, he has examples there of different members of Congress from both parties. There's John Fetterman and some Republicans, John Fetterman, a Democrat, all waving the Israeli flag in Congress. Yeah, John Fetterman, I think that's Rick Scott down there, Senator Rick Scott. And of course, Randy Fine on the right there. He's the Congress member who recently called for nuking Gaza, just like we did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, with the Israeli flag in his office. Here's Andy No. Mexican nationalists continue to face off against National Guardsmen protecting an LA federal building. A person in black bloc waves a U.S. flag. Far left extremists said people needed to do this to make false impression on camera that they're patriotic. Okay, so he thinks people are waving the American flag just to appear falsely patriotic. All right. So when a guy waves a Confederate flag to celebrate heritage is okay, but when a guy waves a Mexican flag to celebrate his heritage, he's an insurrectionist. I'm going to start waving a Mexican flag to troll the snowflakes offended by it. I know it's exactly the same thing, but it's still funny to me how many people complaining about the Mexican flags in LA have Ukrainian or Israeli flags in their bio. That's exactly right. So, Jaleesa, I mean, you've been out there. How many Mexican flags have you seen, and were you offended by them?
Are you guys ready? I was not offended by the Mexican flags in America. Don't shoot. But I wasn't. I did, it's the hypocrisy was best highlighted in all of those tweets. But I mean, it really is baffling. I mean, truly, truly baffling that the Israeli flag does symbolize patriotism in America. And it's incredible to think about that this like a Mexican flag is now looked at as a negative drug, illegal criminal scumbag flag. And I see so many congressmen as well as politicians saying, like, if you wave the Mexican flag, go back to Mexico. You belong in Mexico. If you wave the Israeli flag in the United States of America, you should probably go live in Israel. If that's, if we're going to go based off of technicality, and we're not going to be hypocrites here. So this double standard is amazing. And we can also reference and draw, a parallel to January 6th. January 6th was justified. January 6th, everybody was pardoned. January 6th, we had to empathize. These people were cheated out of an election. How can this be? cops were violated. People were throwing furniture at each other. In a huge security breach, Americans stormed the Capitol, which should be a felony, is insane. And what's more insane is the fact that they were pardoned. But you had officials pardoning them. I did a show with ID Media earlier this year, what the live reactions to the J6ers getting pardoned. And my thing is, this is the dissolvement of due process at best. And so the hypocrisy is astounding, and it couldn't be any more glaring, but very interesting, definitely. But I'm not offended. No.
Yeah, listen, I wasn't actually offended when January 6th protesters got pardoned. I thought that, in many cases there were excessive sentences, and people put in prison for going into the Capitol when it wasn't authorized. I think there was some harsh persecution there, but it's funny that some of the same people who championed being lenient on January 6th protesters now support this harsh crackdown on
ICE protesters.
On anti-ICE protests. It's hard to find some consistency in this country, and that's what we're trying to find here. Okay, we'll be right back. Over to Misha.
Let's see what we got. We got a lot of unvaccinated guy. It's nice to see you so active today, unvaccinated guy. Winchester III, Captain Spaulding, and Hervey, is it Villachez, are all doppelganger of Kurt Metzger, one and the same, perhaps all wrapped up into one. Kurt, I hope maybe he's watching the show now. He'll be with us later on. So these are all lost on us when he should be hearing them. FSO, buy the new Palantir AI sex robot. Every nut is a psyop. Thanks, FSO. FSO is back. You're a deep state tool if you're cheering on these immigration raids. Violence to create fear, so you will cheer for the surveillance state. Unvaccinated guy saw blank and blank at Dugin in the Bay concert. Okay, thanks. I'm gonna leave that at that, and we're gonna go back to Aaron.
Just 2 blanks on that comment. That we're getting somewhere. All right. I'm Aaron Mate, sitting in for Jimmy Dore here with Jaleesa DeGrow, independent journalist covering the LA protests for Mint Press News. And Donald Trump has opinions on who is out there protesting ICE and the raids on undocumented immigrants. He thinks some of them might be professionals.
Breaking up the sidewalks with a big hammer, handing pieces of the concrete to other people. Who do you think is paying for that? Somebody's paying for it. Thank you. We might have something to do with it. Thank you for saying that. Somebody's paying for that. I watched total professionals. He's banging the curb, banging the granite, banging the concrete. And he had a whole group of people. They lined up like totally professionals, grabbed the big chunks, and they dropped it on the soldiers. They dropped it on the Los Angeles police. These are insurrectionists, they're agitators, or troublemakers. At a minimum, they're troublemakers.
All right. So he grants that they might just be troublemakers, not paid professionals. But look, many people out there think that there are some paid agitators out there. Jaleesa, you've been in the streets. Have you seen, in your opinion, any paid protesters?
Haven't seen any paid protesters yet. There's a huge mass protest tonight, so I'll be sure to clue you in if I see anything. Right now, what I really keep seeing in the protests, even the pop-up ones around the city, is that they warn each other, in the midst of these protests. Don't throw anything. Don't fight them. Just do what they say and comply. And they chant and they remain organized as they conduct these protests. But I haven't seen any paid agitators. But I do believe that they exist. And I do believe that they exist by the opposite party, or, MAGA, or, anybody under Donald Trump. And I do believe they exist to legitimize or provide credibility to the harsh crackdowns, to continue them, is what I believe.
What I find funny about every time you have mass protests, there's somebody on either side to say that everyone is just they're the work of foreign agitators. So you're hearing that now from like Stephen Miller, that this is like part of a planned plot to sow chaos from Mexico. The Mexicans are behind this, and Democrats did this too. I mean, they did this for years throughout Russiagate. Here is, for example, former senior Obama administration and Biden administration official Susan Rice, during the Black Lives Matter protests of 2020, she was sure that Russia was fueling the fire.
Russian playbook as well. But we can't allow the extremists, the foreign actors, to distract from the real problems we have in this country that are long-standing, centuries old, and need to be addressed responsibly by new leadership.
You're absolutely right on the foreign interference, because we know for decades the Russians, when it was the Soviet Union, the communists, they've often tried to embarrass the United States by promoting the racial divide in our country. But what you're suggesting, Ambassador, is that they're still trying to do that? Is that what you're saying?
Well, we see it all the time. We've seen it for years and frankly every day on social media, where they take any divisive, painful issue, whether it's immigration, whether it's gay rights, whether it's gun violence, and always racism, and they play on both sides. Their aim is not simply to embarrass the United States, Wolf. Their aim is to divide us, to cause us to come into combat with each other, to disintegrate from within. And I would not be surprised to learn that they have fomented some of these extremists on both sides using social media. I wouldn't be surprised to learn that they're funding it in some way, shape, or form.
So basically, Democrats say it's always the Russians that are sowing chaos. And the MAGA crowd, at least, the people in the administration that are consider themselves MAGA, people like Stephen Miller, I mean, he talks about illegal alien invaders, cartel killers, foreign terrorists, transnational gangs, that they're the ones sowing chaos deliberately. So everything basically is always a foreign plot designed to destroy the U.S. and not maybe something to do with uniquely, U.S. problems that are homegrown. In the case of the U.S., and this is the part that always gets ignored, there are a lot of undocumented immigrants here, and a lot of them are here because the U.S. helped destroy their countries. Like, for example, in Latin America, launching coups that are designed to destroy entire economies, like in Venezuela with the sanctions, or in Cuba, which has been the target of a regime change campaign for more than 60 years. And people flee countries when you try to destroy their economies. That's what happens. But that side never gets discussed by either side of the aisle, whether it's Democrats or it's Republicans.
America has a great habit of that. Western intervention in the Middle East and in South America is one hell of a drug. And we definitely blow it up and then wonder why, these people can't afford food or they are fleeing their countries. It's definitely because of us. And it's very evident. The list of examples definitely could go on and on. But I mean, other than that, even in California, it has real issues of its own. The housing crisis, the economy, the fires, like real problems that affect Americans, Californians every single day that people fail to address. And for some reason, we're, suddenly and solely focused on, the migrants, the immigrants, the Mexicans, like they're this looming problem that we just need to get off of, and they actually benefit California in multiple ways, more than one. And I just feel like we're looking away from that to probably push a larger agenda that the United States has in mind.
All right. And when we come back, we're going to talk about another country where U.S. policy, U.S. regime change efforts have caused a lot of migrants, among other problems, which is Syria. And we'll have that after Misha.
All right. Lightweight Jive says, we aren't MAGA in the chat. We're mostly centrists here. It means fighting for the balance in immigration that protects American workers first. Thank you, Lightweight Jive. And now Benjamin Vito says, this is an astroturfed psyop. The most patriotic thing you can do is not participate. BLM, January 6th, destabilize America. Chaos favors the rich. Thank you, Benjamin Vito. Unvaccinated guy. Oh, this is fun. Misha is trying to create a singularity by pulling her bottom lip over her head and swallowing. Thank you. Thank you for that, unvaccinated guy. That's a really nice image, I think, for all of us. Seth Cable, the Confederate flag is from America and the Mexican is from another nation. Assimilate or leave the USA. Oh, okay, Seth Cable. Mrs. Richie Blackmore, there are reports of the IDF training Mexican cartels going back 40 years. Israel also sells them weapons. Thank you, Mrs. Richie Blackmore. And now back to Aaron.
I'm Aaron Mate with Jaleesa Dugro, independent journalist. Let's talk about Syria, Jaleesa, something you've covered a lot. But first, let's talk about the problem that the U.S. has, not just in Syria, but around the world, with the kind of allies that it links up with to pursue proxy wars and regime change. This is in Ukraine, and this comes from Declassified. NATO deleted a tweet after complaints it featured a Ukraine soldier with a Black Sun Nazi symbol on her uniform. A NATO official told Declassified the post was removed when we realized it contained a symbol that we could not verify as official. Yes, the symbol was Nazi because that's who the U.S. has sided with in its longstanding proxy war against Russia inside of Ukraine, going back many years, especially the 2014 Maidan coup, which set off all this fighting and carnage inside Syria. Here's another tweet. Not Ukraine's Jewish president being guarded by a guy with an SS patch. That's German for some Nazi shit. And yeah, there's Zelensky, and a guy behind him has a backpack with a Nazi symbol on it, which has become a major problem inside Ukraine. Now, this is a similar problem that in Syria, where the U.S. over the years basically tacitly, in some cases overtly, encouraged the rise of ISIS, because ISIS was fighting alongside other groups like Al-Qaeda, against the Syrian government of Bashar al-Assad, who was successfully overthrown finally last year. Just some headlines from CNN recently claiming that ISIS was in fact challenging the new government that the U.S. helped install. ISIS claims the first attacks against forces loyal to the new government Syria. ISIS launches first attacks against the new Syrian government. So this was corporate media basically saying that even though the U.S. sided with ISIS and Al-Qaeda against Bashar al-Assad and the regime change war in Syria, that in fact the new government that we helped install, led by the former leader of Al-Qaeda in Syria, they're actually against ISIS. But here's a problem. ISIS guys are still turning up supporting the new government. The new Syrian security forces patrolling Tartus and Latakia, proudly displaying their ISIS patches, making sure they're visible in the frame. So there's a problem here where both the U.S. and the new Syrian government, led by the former Al-Qaeda guy, they claim they're against ISIS, but yet ISIS is turning up still in areas controlled by the government and patrolling areas on behalf of the government. Here's the video. So there we go. Two ISIS guys on patrol in Syria, and in some of these areas, like Latakia, these are heavy Alawite areas, and this has been where there have been massacres going on for many months now against Alawite civilians. Alawites being linked to the former government because that was the minority group that Bashar al-Assad was a part of, and there have been a lot of killings, sectarian killings of Alawite groups, because the insurgency that took over the government was led by Al-Qaeda, which had carried out attacks like that before. So that's going on. Here's why it read: if anyone still believes that occupying Syria, as the U.S. did by deploying military forces, was about stopping ISIS, let me know. I have some gorgeous beachfront property in Raqqa that's priced to move. And still, though, despite all this, despite the sectarian killings, despite the presence of ISIS, despite the fact that a former Al-Qaeda leader is now the head of the Syrian government, the U.S. is formalizing its military presence in Syria in a deal with the Al-Qaeda-linked government. And there's been talk for a long time now about basically U.S. and Syria relations improving. Trump recently lifted sanctions on Syria because the job was done. The sanctions helped destroy Syria's economy, helped bring about regime change. Now the sanctions can be lifted. And look at this. This is from Reuters. Washington has okayed Syrian plans to merge thousands of foreign fighters into the new army. According to U.S. envoy Thomas Barak, there is understanding with transparency on the issue. He said it was better to keep the fighters, many of whom are very loyal to Syria's new administration, within a state project than to exclude them. So basically, you have thousands of foreign fighters, people who aren't even Syrian, now being formally included into the new Syrian army. And a lot of these foreign fighters, they did not come to Syria to bring democracy and freedom. They came to pursue their own unique, and I would say perverted version of Islam, which including to attack minority groups like the Alawites, which has been going on. And now they get the okay from Washington to be a part of the new Syrian army. So, Jalisa, I mean, you've covered Syria a lot. My first question to you is, why does Washington, who gave Washington the okay to give Syria the okay to decide who can be in their new army or not, especially if it's foreign fighters who aren't even Syrian?
Well, everything that we've seen thus far, Syria must get permission in order to move forward. And we can see the sanctions are pretty evident of that. The sanctions were a reward because Abu Muhammad al-Julani fulfilled what he was supposed to do, which is to overthrow Bashar al-Assad and instill the new regime change government that the United States wanted so far. Syria was one of the last, Arab states that stood actively against Western imperialism. Bashar did not want to sell out to the West, is what I believe. And so it was one of the really large last states standing against that. And it was in the way. There were a lot of projects that other countries wanted, including the United States, big or small, that Syria actively stood in the way of, that Bashar al-Assad actively stood in the way of. And so this regime change was a long time coming by the United States for a very long time. And so they're mom and dad of this project. And so Syria has to ask for permission. And so they've okayed this. And it's pretty evident that they were over the regime change, considering that the US has to okay this. No formal statement was made from Donald Trump, I don't think. Let me know if I'm wrong. It just came out in an article one day that they were okayed to go ahead and integrate thousands of foreign fighters into the new Syrian army, which is a recipe for disaster in and of itself.
Here's what I said about this. Did the people of Syria elect the mandarins of Washington to okay plans for their country's army? No. The mandarins of Washington gave themselves the right to regime change Syria by arming an al-Qaeda-led, foreign-dominated insurgency, imposing crippling sanctions, and sending U.S. troops to loot Syria's oil and wheat. One result is that Washington now gets to give the okay to their foreign proxies' army. But look, this regime change campaign is yielding results for the U.S. Here is a scoop from Barack Ravid of Axios. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told U.S. envoy Tom Barak he's interested in negotiating new agreements with the new Syrian government, with the U.S. serving as mediator, Israeli officials said. And this makes sense, Jalisa, because Israel played a major role in putting that new government in power in Syria. They armed the insurgency that was dominated by al-Qaeda, which now leads the government. They bombed Syria hundreds of times, including bombing Iranian ships that were trying to break the U.S.-led blockade of Syria by delivering oil so that Syrians could have the energy to power their homes and their cars. So Israel played a major role in bringing about the new Syrian government. So it's no surprise to me that they want to now make a deal with their old friends.
Oh yeah, it's definitely no surprise at all. I mean, the cake was cut before December when Bashar was overthrown. The cake was cut. We just didn't know who was going to get a piece of what. It's really sad, and I've long said this, and I repeat it so much, is that it's just very challenging, Syria, is because the overthrow of Bashar did not come at the hands of the people. It came at the hands of two-time terrorists that are about three-time terrorist group that is backed by the United States and backed by Israel. The sovereignty and security of Syria should not come at, the yes and no of the United States and the condition that Israel gets to occupy territory inside of Syria. I mean, this is ridiculous. But nevertheless, like you said, they've armed and backed, these insurgent groups for quite a long time right now. And I think it's even more telling that Abu Muhammad al-Julani is not fighting back nor responding to Israel when Israel is inside of Syria, bombing their weapon depots, caches, and things like that. And it's essentially to what? It's to completely disarm Syria so that Syria cannot fight back. And then they will become a weak state, demilitarized almost, that they cannot respond to, threats outside of that, and more importantly to Israel. And really quick, this is also evident in the fact of the dissolvement of the 1974 disengagement line that Israel for a very long time had been violating anyways. But on December 8th, Netanyahu made a statement and said, this 1974 disengagement line is now dissolved. And when you guys have a government, we'll go ahead and reestablish it. But he has since then announced that he will not be removing the IDF from, Syria. And so this was just the plan all along: create the pretext, overthrow, create the pretext, move in, occupy, and take complete control.
All right, Jaleesa Dugro, we know you have more protests to go cover in LA. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the Jimmy Dore Show.
Thank you so much.
Over to Misha.
All right. BC Sides Indivisible project is in cohorts with the ADL and Bend the Arc. They are funding this AstroTurf movement and agitators. This movement doesn't support Gaza whatsoever, just chaos. Thank you, BC Sides. Stephen Dodds is a one-state solution where all peoples living inside Israel have full rights guaranteed better than what we have now. Thank you, Stephen Dodds. Jimmy V1, this is a psyop to take the last bit of liberty and personal sovereignty we have left. Don't be left versus right. Don't be a left versus right, useful idiot. Please, for all sakes. For all our sakes. Thank you, Jimmy V1. Rumtech77, both sides will use agitators, one to point to Trump, the other one for new security messages. Either side gains from citizen illogic and irrationale. Write the politicians, not grant them propaganda. Thank you for that one. And thank you for the generous chat, Rumtech77. My real name, speaking of Mexicans, where's Kerp? Kerp, he's still on the schedule to be here a little later. We've got a couple more guests, and then we'll see Kurt maybe within the hour. So stand by for Kurt, my real name, and thank you for the chat. Back from the road, the correct flag to wave is the red banner of the people. Alas, this unorganized DNC promoted shit show won't advance material interests of the working class. It will advance the security state, though. Thank you for that one. Back from the road. And now back to Aaron.
Misha, give me one more second, actually. Just come on.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I've got it.
Yeah, my bad.
No problem. BC Sides. Oh, you know what? Things were getting a little crazy for a second there, and I screenshotted this one twice. But thank you for your chat again, BC Sides. Julius Patty, Jaleesa. Julius Patty says you can't claim that J6ers should be jailed for protesting whilst wanting the right to protest against ICE. And that's fair, Julius Patty. F. Hassau, if these violent protests were in any other country than America, 100% of the foreign violent agitators are American operatives. Thank you, F. Hassau. BC Sides, the left is far more likely to engage in political violence. Either they are paid, like at rallies and protests during the election, or they just want to destroy stuff because they are low IQ. Is that right? Thank you, BC Sides.
Okay, we're good. We're good.
All right, and now back to Aaron.